There is a moment before every important thing that you do. Not the doing, not the finishing. The moment right before the start. Your body knows what's coming. The energy, the focus, the not stopping until it's done. And some part of you dreads it. Not because you don't want to do it, not because you don't even care about it, because you know yourself. You know that once you open the project, you won't close it until it's right, until it's completely finished, until there's nothing else left to adjust. And that amount of energy, the all in, the can't stop, the give everything, feels enormous before you've even begun the task. So what do you do instead? Well, you don't begin. Not yet, not today, maybe tomorrow. I know this machinery because I lived in it myself for years. The procrastination, well, that wasn't laziness. The dread that wasn't lack of motivation. The fear that starting meant consuming, and consuming meant the old story might repeat. The story where you gave your all and it just wasn't enough. So today I want to talk about what lives in that delay, not in my life, but in your life. The system one reflex that says, don't start because starting means you can't stop. And not stopping means exposure. And exposure means the old wiring fires again. Because the gap between knowing you'll finish and actually beginning, that's where life is waiting. You know you'll finish it. That's not the issue. The issue is the amount of energy you know it will take. The not stopping, the can't leave it half done. The loop where the project owns you until you own it. You procrastinate because you know what happens when you start. You don't just work on something, you inhabit it, you adjust it. You see every flaw, every gap, every place where it could have been better. And you can't stop until those places are filled. Not because you're a perfectionist in the Instagram sense, not because you want praise, because deep down, wired into your nervous system from childhood, there is a belief. If you don't give 100%, the failure will be your fault. Not because the project was too hard, not because the timing was wrong, because you didn't try hard enough. And trying hard enough means not stopping. It means giving everything. It means the project consumes you until it's done. The procrastination isn't avoidance of the work, it's avoidance of the consumption. I used to think I was lazy. I used to think I lacked discipline. I used to beat myself up for not starting, not knowing that the beating myself up was part of the same machinery. The machinery that says your all is the absolute minimum. Your all is the starting line. Your all is the only way that you can be safe. We are all wired the same at our cores, not in our personalities, not in our preferences, but in our machinery. We're shaped by conditioning, by the stories we absorbed before we knew they were stories, by the expectations we learned to meet before we knew that we were meeting them. For some of us, the wiring was don't fail, don't be a failure, and don't disappoint. Not spoken directly, not written on a wall, absorbed through tone, through silence, through the moments when giving less than everything meant something about who you were. So you learned 100% is the minimum. 100% is the starting line. 100% is the only way to be safe. And that wiring doesn't care if the project is a creative work, a job assignment, or even just a conversation. It cares about one thing: was all of you in it? Because if all of you was in it and it still didn't work, then at least the failure wasn't from lack of effort. At least you can't be blamed. At least you're not a failure. This is System 1 doing what it was built to do, protecting the child who learned that love, safety and belonging were conditional on performance. The procrastination is System 1 saying, if we don't start, we can't fail. If we don't start, we can't be judged. If we don't start, the old story can't repeat. System 2, well, System 2 knows better. System 2 knows that you'll finish. System 2 knows that you care. System 2 knows the work matters. But System 2 doesn't start the project. System 2 creates the gap where the starting becomes possible. You might have a job you don't love. The script hates it. The script runs old stories every time you walk through the door. Stories of bad days, stories of being walked over, stories of your good nature being used by people who saw it as a weakness. When you're in the script, the job is the enemy. The job is the place where you were small. The job is the place where you performed okayness while you felt diminished. But when you're in the moment, when you're actually there doing your work, present in your body, something different happens. You thrive, not because the job is better than you think, and not because the people changed, not because the old stories weren't real, because you were present. You're not carrying the old stories. You're not rehearsing the old shutdowns, and you're not managing your image while you manage your tasks. You're just there. And when you're just there, you do good work. You engage. You hold interesting conversations. You don't walk with your head held down. You don't avoid eye contact. You don't dread the next interaction. Now, I'll be honest, I used to hate small talk. I still don't love it. But what I learned was, it wasn't the small talk that I actually hated. It was the performance required to survive it. The script hates the job. You don't. The script hates the vulnerability of being seen while you work. But you don't. The script hates the possibility that someone might walk over you again. But you don't. Because when you're present and the gap is open, well, the gap provides that safety net to show that the patterns don't necessarily drive the situation. I want to talk about what you're building, not the project as a product, not the achievement as proof, the construction site itself, the place where the old performance used to live and where something else is growing. For me, it started with my body and my appearance. I used to spend hours getting ready, styling my hair, covering spots, looking at what I wanted to wear, managing my appearance like it was a full-time job. Not because I was vain, but because I was controllable in that moment. Yeah, hair can be styled, spots can be covered, you can wear nice clothes. But those fixes I could apply in a world where conversations shut down was not fixable. But now I don't think about it. I can speak to someone without panicking about what to say next. I can hold an interesting conversation, and I can be in a room without rehearsing my exit. That's not confidence, that's construction. The old contract expired, the old performance stopped, and in that space that opened, I started putting my energy somewhere else, into my body, into my breathing, into the message that we're all wired the same, shaped by conditioning, carrying noise that isn't ours, into the relationship where we don't argue anymore, where we sit down and discuss things, where disagreement doesn't become ammunition, where we can bicker without it becoming a war. And that's not because we're perfect, it's because we're present. And you're building something too. Maybe you don't know what it is yet. Maybe the foundation is still being poured. Maybe the only evidence that you're doing it right is the relief you feel when you stop performing. And that is enough. Here's what nobody tells you about construction. It doesn't feel like progress most of the time. It feels like the old thing is gone and the new thing isn't solid yet. It feels like you might have made a mistake. It feels like the people who watched you perform are watching you build. And some of them are waiting for it to collapse. But the script says, go back. The old contract was predictable. The old performance was safe. The old you knew the rules. But then System 2 says, stay. The new rules are being written. The foundation is being poured. The building isn't finished, but the ground it's on is real. You might have bowed down in relationships, sat silently when you should have spoken, absorbed the hit, told yourself, pick your battles, don't rock the boat. The relationship is more important than this one thing. And every time you swallowed the voice, the contract got stronger. But now, maybe you're learning to communicate. Not perfectly, not without bickering, but sitting down and discussing it. Saying, this hurt me. Saying, I need something. Saying, I don't know yet, but I want to figure it out with you. The gap lets you do that. The gap between feeling the irritation and expressing it. The gap between the old story, they'll leave if I speak, and the new data, well, they're still here and they want to understand. The gap isn't magic, it's not spiritual, and it's not quantum. It's the processing time between System 1 and System 2, between the reflex and the response, between the old wiring and the new choice. And that gap is where the relationship lives now, not in the performance, not in the contracts, not in the version of you that shuts down when things get real. It's the real thing, the conversation, the courage to be seen, the willingness to build something that doesn't require you to be small. I used to walk into rooms with my head down, not giving the eye contact, not wanting to engage. I thought I hated people. I thought I was antisocial. But it turns out I wasn't. I was just exhausted from the performance. But now, yeah, I don't like small talk, but I can still hold that conversation. I can be present and I can thrive in what I'm doing. And it's not because I changed who I am. It's because I stopped being who I wasn't. So how do you use this when this video ends? When you feel that procrastination rising, don't fight it. Don't force yourself to start. Just notice it and name it silently. This is the dread of the energy, not the dread of the work. This is System 1 protecting the child who learned that failure meant something about your worth. When you finally start, don't expect to feel motivated. Expect to feel consumed. And know that that consumption is just the old wiring, not the task itself. The task, well, it's just the task. The consumption is the belief that your all is the minimum. When you're at the job you don't love, notice the script running the old stories and don't argue with it. Just notice this is System 1 remembering. This is not System 2 seeing what's actually here. Then look at what's actually here. The work, the moment, the possibility of presence, even if the place is a place you don't want to be. When you feel the old urge to bow down in a relationship, create the gap, 1 breath, 3 seconds. The question, am I silent because this isn't important? Or is it because I'm afraid? When you feel the fear that the new construction isn't solid, Remember, it isn't. That's not failure, that's building. The foundation is real even when the walls aren't up yet. When you feel the loneliness of the old contract expiring, just let it be data, not grief, not loss. Just evidence that you stopped supplying a performance. And the people who needed that performance, well, they probably found other places to be. When you feel the deep-rooted fear of failure, name it. This is the wiring, this is the child who didn't want to disappoint. This is not the adult who knows that giving your all is a choice, not a requirement. So we're all wired the same at our cores. Not in what we want, not in where we end up, but in the machinery. We're shaped by conditioning, by the stories we absorbed before they knew they were stories, by the expectations we learned to meet before we knew we were meeting them. The noise that surrounds us isn't personal, it's just the sound of everyone else's system one firing patterns they didn't choose either. The people who focus too much on others, the ones who need someone below them, who need the joke, who need the performance, they're not your enemies. They're just people who haven't found their own gap yet. And you can't build their gap for them. You can only build yours. So the construction site is messy. The old contract is expired. The new rules are being written. And some days, the only evidence that you're doing it right is the relief that you feel when you stop performing. And that is enough. The real you, the one who procrastinates because you care too much, who gives you all because you learn that love was conditional, who thrives when you're present and dreads the consumption when you're not, that you is enough. More than enough. That you is the only one that can build this. So stop waiting for the construction to be finished. The building is never done. The gap is always opening and closing. The practice is always the practice. And the real thing, the presence, the conversation, the courage to be seen while you're still building is so much better. It's waiting for you in the gap. So if you're building something in the space where you used to perform, even the foundation, even just the first wall, let me know in the comments. I'm really interested to hear what you're constructing. And if this hits something for you, you can find me on my socials, Craig Lewis Life Coach. Like this video and share it with someone who is learning to start despite that dread. I'll catch you on the next one.